I can forgive without God's help.
Controversial statement.
Controversial statement. Let's talk about it, because this whole session we're talking about how God is involved in our process of forgiveness. So I wanted to pose a question towards the end of this session now. Can I truly forgive someone or something without God's help?
Well, I think it was in session 3 that we began this process, back in session 3. Mm-hmm. We said that forgiveness is emotional forgetfulness. Mm-hmm. In other words, you no longer have an emotional signature internally about what others have done to you.
Yeah.
That's what forgiveness is.
So you remember the events or the interactions, but there's no negative emotional response in you anymore.
That's right. You now no longer feel hatred or anger or resentment towards the person who did it. It also is no longer affecting your life. Mm. That's it. That's the indicator that it's no longer affecting your life in negative ways. That means you've truly forgiven the particular event that would have otherwise caused you to not only be angry and resentful, but also to take actions that harm yourself or others in the future. Mm-hmm. So here we are. We're in this state of emotional forgetfulness. Mm-hmm. Now, the question then becomes, can emotional forgetfulness happen without God?
Yeah.
The answer is yes, it can. Mm-hmm. You can emotionally forget what other people have done to you without God's help. Mm-hmm. You can. It's pretty hard, but you can.
So I need to release emotion, just like we talked about in those first 3 or 4 sessions in this series. I need to release emotion. I need to see the truth of what harm was actually done and release emotion according to that truth.
Correct.
So I have to know that for sure and get it right, and then release emotion.
But this is all without God's help, so God's not telling you now.
Yep, there's no, it's just all
you got to work it all out.
Yep.
Right.
Detective work and, analysis. And so it's going to be
This is the path of natural love that I've talked about for last 14 years or whatever it is. I've been talking about it. Well, I've been talking about it, but most people have heard it for 10 or so. But, that's the path of natural love, having to do all that work yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty hard work.
It's hard, but a lot of people do it.
Yeah.
It takes them well into the spirit life to actually
there's a lot of people who've reached the 6th dimension of the spirit world who have done it. It's taken them 100 years or 200 years. Some of them it's only taken 50, but they've had to be pretty dedicated to do it for every single thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's pretty hard work.
So to answer definitively, yes, it can be done, but it will be harder. Mm. Let's talk about just succinctly now some of the ways that having God involved makes it easier. Mm. So we can do it without God, but if we do it with God, here's some things that God's going to help us with.
Yeah. So let's look at it. God's help firstly. The conscience helps me recognise what a sin is.
Yes.
If I don't have the conscience telling me what a sin is, how do I recognise what a sin is?
Yeah.
I'm going to probably have to have some pain and suffering and go, the pain and suffering is telling me what a sin is. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be harder.
Yeah.
Plus it's going to be more emotional. Yeah. Because I've got more pain and suffering.
Yeah.
So, that's going to be pretty harsh.
Yes.
Number one. Number 2, God's love shows me how to love myself.
Yeah.
What love of myself means. So imagine I don't know what love of myself means. Mm. Now I've got to work out what love is. Now, living in an environment like the world we live in, trying to work out what love of self really is pretty hard.
Yeah.
Because everybody believes something different about it. Mm-hmm. Most people believe you love yourself, you're up yourself, or they believe if you love yourself, you're arrogant or whatever. Mm-hmm. But other people believe if you love yourself, then you are arrogant. They actually believe that's a good thing. So there's all these sort of mixed messages that come from the world. So you're not going to be able to rely on the world to give you any accurate reflection about what love is. So where do you get your line of what love is?
Your bar. Where do you set the bar?
Where do you set the bar? Mm-hmm. Well, most people don't know.
Yeah.
And you can only again go by pain and suffering.
Yeah.
So if there's pain, it must be I've crossed the bar.
Yeah, the bar.
I've set the bar too low.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So having God's help, it helps us to love ourselves. It also helps us to recognise truth. It helps. Oh, sorry.
That's an obvious one, obviously. Because the conscience, through God's connection with God, can now give me the truth. I can find out the truth on any matter. So it helps me recognise what the truth is really rapidly. Imagine again, I've got no way of knowing.
Yeah.
What do I do then?
Yeah.
So every discovery of every new truth will have to be an experiment that could fail. And you know what it's like if you're a scientist, you know you have to often create hundreds of experiments and every one of them fails.
Yeah.
And you still haven't found the truth.
Yes.
Very
Your life's work can actually be eliminating
all the errors. Yeah.
and still not find the actual solution.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's many unsung scientists on the planet who have spent their entire life finding all the things that haven't worked.
And then the next generation of scientists comes along, can draw on all of that and say, none of that worked, I'll try this, and boom, first cab off the rank.
First few times he finds the answer.
Yeah.
And then he's lauded as being the most fantastic person because he's just discovered this new thing. And he's actually based his work on hundreds of failures that somebody else had to spend a whole life doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not very good recognition of truth there. But, you know, that's often the case. This is often the case in our own life.
Yeah.
If we can easily find the truth, it's going to make our life a lot easier. Yeah.
God also helps us to be humble. And I'll talk to you in detail about how God does all these things after this.
Yeah.
But God helps us to be humble. And without that assistance, then we've got to kind of develop that humility muscle on our own.
Yeah, well,
we don't have the benefit of the sensitivity.
On the earth, we have the sort of the attitude, don't we? It's like, you know, I'm just as equal as everyone else, so I shouldn't have to listen to anybody. is a subsequent result of that. But when we compare ourselves with God, we go, oh, obviously God must be better than me. So at least I have some level of humility when it comes to listening.
Some of us, it takes a long time to get to that
Of course,
point.
but at least, you know, if I do believe in a God, I probably think God's better than I am.
All right, having God involved also helps us to forgive when we know that God's laws require it.
Yeah, and this is a factor about God's laws requiring it. Because we obviously have some respect for God and God's laws now, the fact that God's laws require it, and this brings me into the next point too, that God's laws are obviously required to make us happy. So this particular thing of God's laws requiring it and having some faith that it's to be happy, then that's obviously going to motivate me to actually go through the process.
Yeah.
So having this awareness of God's laws and that there's God's desire to be happy, and that's why God created those laws, is obviously going to help me, you know, go through the process of forgiveness and repentance rather than avoid it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, now we'll quickly recap each of those things.
Sure.
So we've contrasted now the fact that we can forgive without God's help, but we're going to
be tough.
do without that long list of things we just mentioned.
It's going to be tough, and it is tough. Everybody in the spirit world, in the sixth sphere, who's gone through it, prefers to not remember it. And you know, when you try to pull them back into the remembering the process, frequently the discussion doesn't go well because they just want to avoid the discussion still. Because there is it has been a painful process, you know, and even remembering the process can feel a bit painful sometimes. So it's better to forget the process even after a while. That's how they feel. Because it is tough. It is a tough process. Yeah, which most people who hear divine truth right at the moment are actually doing. The tough road. They're not doing the easy road, they're doing the hard way.
Yeah.
And that's why most of them feel tired, exhausted, angry, bitter, twisted sometimes, you know, because they're doing it the hard way. Yeah, we've got to understand that just because we think we're doing it the right way, it's not necessarily true. If we're tired and exhausted, high likelihood we're not doing it the right way. Yeah.